Hey guys, welcome on into the next NHL season preview show. And today we're going to be talking all about the New York Rangers, taking a look at their additions and subtractions, upcoming free agents, possible lineup for opening night, team future bets, and player future bets. And to talk about the Rangers, I brought in Jackson at PuckPicks1 on Twitter. You can get his description or you can get his Twitter link in the description below. He's been on a few shows in the past. But for people that haven't seen you before, Jackson, give yourself a brief introduction here on the show.
Yeah. Thanks for having me back on. Always good to talk hockey together. Yeah. So like Terry said, Jackson, I run Puck Picks on Twitter. Um, really just a guy who's played hockey his whole life and loves to try to help people win some money watching it too. So uh, this season will be a lot of fun. I got some big things in store, some stuff coming out that should be, I think, interesting for everybody. But I'm excited to break down how the Rangers season's going to look.
Awesome, perfect. And you don't bet Rangers games,
No,
which is
and
a lot different than me and Wild games, because I'm all over the Wild games, but we don't bet Rangers games, so that's kind of interesting. But we'll jump into it here. Additions and subtractions, and not really a big list here for the President's Trophy winners, the New York Rangers, who won the President's Trophy last year. Didn't decide they needed a bunch of moves. Barclay Goodrow was on waivers. Blake Wheeler, obviously getting up there in age. Roslovic moved on. Eric Gustafson, I think, played pretty well with the Rangers last year. Wenberg and Nick Patan gone. So looking at that list, there are guys that are replaceable for the most part. I don't think
agreed.
any one of those losses are going to devastate this team and make them go backwards. They're kind of depth guys that you can replace. I really like Riley Smith. I
Same.
do. I've always liked Riley Smith. I really like that addition for the Rangers. I think
A
he
lot of
is
people
a
didn't,
up.
which I get. I loved it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. A lot of people. Hey, he didn't really play that well when he was at Pittsburgh,
It was a
but
down year for them, though. Like it wasn't the same season there, and the whole offense struggled.
yeah, exactly. And now he's coming in here to play with the Rangers. I like it as an upgrade over Blake Wheeler or Roslovic. Benoit Oliver Grew coming in here from Anaheim. A couple guys in tryouts, so they haven't been signed yet as of we record this video. And then Sam Carrot coming in. So depth guys in, depth guys out. I really like the Riley Smith addition, but really the Rangers didn't really need to do anything huge in this offseason. And they didn't. Jackson, what do you think here? Additions and subtractions.
Yeah, so I totally agree. Right, like it was a matter of moving depth pieces in and out, and it wasn't going to be a off season where you shake up the core. There was a lot of money tied up in a lot of guys. Like Trouba was very likely not going to get traded anywhere, especially that was going to relieve the Rangers of the cap space they would have wanted or people were hoping for. Um, so I think that with the space that they had and the options they had, I think they did a really good job. Like I love bringing in Riley Smith. He's a veteran who has won a Stanley Cup, has played a lot of hockey in his career, and has played really important hockey games across basically his entire career. I guess not when he started out, maybe in Florida, but aside from that, I think that he is a good addition to that first line. I think he'll bring um, a little more punch to it. Kreider's going to be in front of the net like that. Mika can be a little softer at times on the board play, and I think that Riley Smith is the kind of guy that can really add some more juice to that first line. Um, but I also think that he can slot anywhere up and down the lineup, right? Like he can play second, third, or even fourth line. We've seen him do it. So it wouldn't surprise me if that also opens up the option to bring Lafreniere. Riley Smith spent a lot of time in his Florida career playing with Vincent Trocheck, and they actually averaged like a point per game together across their time on the same line. So it wouldn't surprise me if we see him end up on the second line at some point. As far as the other guys go, like Grew, Ernie, Bowie, like they're not. It would surprise me if they're not even on the team come opening night, or even in the minors. Sam Carrick, solid addition. Spent time, I think, with Anaheim and Edmonton. I think he's a good player, good fourth line guy. Um, Probably the fourth line center for the majority of the season, I would imagine. Barring barring injuries or someone coming up in a trade situation. But I didn't think they had to do too much, and I think that they did a good job with the options they had. I think the deadline will be a lot more telling, especially with wherever the team is positioned. Come then.
Awesome. Totally agree. Now, smaller additions and subtractions lists, for some reason, usually means that we're going to have a list like this when it comes to upcoming free agents. So,
A lot of
um,
names there, Terry. A lot of names.
exactly. And you get to start first with this segment. Um, you don't have to go over every guy, but there's a lot of
Yeah.
guys here. Who should the Rangers focus on re-signing? I'm having a feeling it's gonna be quite a few names, but who should they focus on re-signing, and who would you be okay with if they moved on from
Well, I think it's pretty clear that there's three names, right, that are your top three priorities. And in order, I would say it's Igor Shesterkin, Alexi Lafreniere, and Keandre Miller. And I think that those will probably be the first three guys to get signed. You can't let those three guys go. They're going to be cornerstones of the franchise for the next 5 to 10 years at a minimum, and they're the guys you lock in now. Um, I want to bring back Kako. I think he's a great two-way player. He is still 23 years old, and people are all over him about not being good enough. And I think he's done a ton in playing in the NHL for 4 years already. Like Filipino's 25, and I think it's going to be his eighth year in the NHL. Like Kapakako has had a lot of experience, and he's still very young. And I'm not ready to give up on him just yet. I bring him back on a deal that's maybe 2 years, sort of another bridge type of situation. Um, I would like to bring back Lindgren, although not necessarily depends on the price. I thought that the 1 year deal that he's gone this year is pretty good. I actually ran into him last weekend, so it's pretty funny. Wished him luck on the season. Told him I'm a big fan and rooting for him. But a lot of names here I think are going to end up just walking, right? Like I don't see Chad Ruhwedel coming back. Adam Enstrom, Will Cooley, Matt Rempe will probably all get small deals. I see them all coming back. Cooley's a guy that I would love to bring back. And I think it's VC if he wants to be here, and I'd imagine he does, and they'll probably work something out where that contract just kind of fits into the roster. Riley Smith's probably gone after this year. I think he's a good plug and play piece. Jonathan Quick might retire, and the Rangers have some goalie prospects that I could see them maybe wanting to give a shot. They're a little young, but like Dylan Garand, great player, could come up at some point. But yeah, it's kind of my take on the names we got here.
Awesome. I think fellow Rangers fans are going to be really angry at you because when you mentioned your top three players that they should resign, you didn't include Rempe in there. So I think you've
I know
pissed
you're
off a lot of
a big
Rangers
Rempe guy
Nation
too.
for not having him in the top three. But I agree. I agree with you there. Igor Shesterkin, of course, is the main, I
Yeah.
think, guy on this list. Um, Jonathan Quick, you can move on from him. Like you said, Rangers have other goalies that are coming up. And with Igor Shesterkin being the starter, those other guys don't have to worry about coming in and having the pressure of being a starting goaltender right away. Shesterkin is the guy. So Quick, who's played well with the Rangers, if he has another good season and he still wants to play, I could see them bringing him back on another 1 year deal if he does have a really good season again this year. The defense, Keandre Miller, he can come back home to Minnesota. It's okay. Rangers don't need him. Ryan Lindgren as well, a good defensive guy. Riley Smith, who I really like, as I said in the last segment. We'll see how it goes for him in New York, and of course, how much money he wants. The RFAs, Alexis Lafreniere, kind of in the same boat as Yuri Slavkovsky, where people were saying he's a bust. He's a bust. Why did the Rangers pick him? Blah, 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 blah. And now look, the season he had last year, which we'll talk about later on in the player segment, future bet segment. The RFAs, I think the Rangers shouldn't really have too much issue with. So Will Cooley, Rempe, Edstrom, um, and Capocacco. Hopefully, there shouldn't be an issue with getting him re-signed. How much money does Lafreniere want on this deal? Is he getting a long-term deal? That'll be question marks. Really, there's a lot of lists on this name, a lot of names on this list. So we'll see who gets re-signed after this season. But a lot of work coming here, and maybe, like you said, at the trade deadline, maybe we see a guy like Riley Smith moved. Or maybe we see a guy like Ryan Lindgren moved. Maybe if there's not going to be any contract extensions, maybe the Rangers get ahead of that. So a lot of lists on this name. A lot of lists on this. I don't know why I keep wanting to say that. A lot of names on this list. The Rangers have a big season ahead. So we'll see how that goes. Possible lineup. Taking a look at what the lineup could look like for opening night based on depth charts. Chris Kreider, Mika Zibanejad, and Riley Smith looking like he could be on that top line, which makes a lot of sense. Coming in here and kind of replacing Blake Wheeler, upgrade from Blake Wheeler, and then you don't want to mess around with that second line. There's no reason to change anything with Panarin, Trocheck, and Lafreniere because we'll get to their stats from last year. All three having a great year together, so it makes sense not to touch that line. The third line, which really could have a lot of opportunity this year with defensive lines from other teams, really focusing on the Kreider, Zibanejad, Smith, and Panarin, Trocheck, and Lafreniere lines. It could give Cooley, Philip Hedel, and Kako some good opportunities. So a very good third line there. And that fourth line is not a line anybody wants to play against either. So the Rangers' forward depth, I think, if healthy, is even stronger than last year. So I really like that. Goalies, Shesterkin, a little bit of struggles at times last year, but luckily when he wasn't on his game, Quick was. So the Rangers didn't really get hurt by the goalie issues that they had a little bit last year. But overall, two great goalies. And then the defense, I like Braden Schneider, still a young guy, still coming up. That top line, Lindgren and Fox, Keandre Miller and Truba, two two really good top defensive pairs. And that the third one, Zachary Jones, I don't know a lot about him, but Braden Schneider, a good defensive prospect. I guess he's kind of over the prospect, but he's still a young defenseman. Overall, top to bottom, I like this Rangers lineup. There's really not much to nitpick about. Maybe the third defensive pair, but really there's not much to complain about with this possible lineup. Jackson, is there anything to complain about this lineup? What do you think about these lines for the upcoming season, if it's how it starts?
Yeah, I would say this is probably at least what the group's going to look like come opening night. Maybe Brodzinski starts opening night over Rempe, but I doubt it because a Rempe introduction on opening night is going to get the crowd very much pumped up and into it. But I actually think Brodzinski is the kind of guy that could see some more time with the club this year. Defense is the only place that I'm not worried about in the regular season, but the Rangers have a smaller defensive group. Just height wise, weight wise, like they're just not as big, and I think that cost them a little bit last year in the postseason. So I'd look for them to try to maybe bring in one or two guys during the course of the regular season that might beef up that back line. I do not want to see Keandre Miller and Jacob Trouba together this season. I would like to see them split up. I frankly think Trouba should be on the third defensive pair. He really, really, really struggled at the end of last year and just made some really poor choices that were very surprising to see a NHL captain defenseman make. And I am not convinced that he should be getting top 4 minutes going forward. Ruido, I think, is a good depth guy too. Actually, I think he can slide in and out of the lineup. I thought he was pretty solid in Pittsburgh. And the only other guy that I think might not be with the club come opening night, but is someone to keep an eye on and see throughout the season that might be able to crack in is Brennan Othmann. Great young player, had a great season in the AHL this past year. I think he had like 65 points, like close to 25 goals, I want to say, and like 20 something assists. Great shooter, great control of the puck, great vision. Pretty sizable guy, and he provides a left-handed shot that the Rangers don't really have a ton of on this roster. At least with scoring threat, that is. You really only see, like, I guess they bring in Riley Smith, right? Like Lafreniere, Smith. Do you call Hedel and Kako scoring threats just yet? I don't know. I don't think so. Offman is a natural shooter, and he could be an interesting guy to see, maybe potentially crack in.
Awesome. Any thoughts on the goalies?
I think the goalie group is up there tops in the league. Igor is, I'm a little biased, obviously, but like I do think he has a Vezina winning season this year. I think he showed glimpses last year, and I think I think it's his fourth season potentially in the NHL. Like he can potentially make that even further jump to, really, really becoming the top goalie in the NHL this coming season. Vasilevsky, we saw have a bit of a down year, and I think that there's not as much consistency across the rest of the goaltenders in the league. And I think this is an opportunity for him to really seize that title of the top guy. And I love Quick. I think Quick, like you said, did a great job when Igor went down and was struggling last year a little bit. Quick was able to pick up the slack and do really an incredible job. It seemed like having those extra nights off might have really helped him, not having to be the number one guy, being able to rest up a little more after he uses his crazy athleticism type goaltending that we always have come to see from him. He doesn't play a very conventional style. So I think that's the duo that can carry you to a Stanley Cup win. And I think it's a forward group that can too. I'm just not convinced that it's a defensive group that can just yet. I want to see one or two guys get brought in.
All right. Awesome. Looking at team future bets here, the same bets for every single team. And right off the bat, the Rangers are contenders for the President's Trophy. However,
2 years in a row,
I was on the Rangers to win the Stanley Cup. I had a bet on them last year that I placed there before or early on in the playoffs. Unfortunately, the President's Trophy curse did get them in the end. No, I don't know if I can use that as an excuse, but it is real. So unfortunately, they were unable to get there to win the cup. But I do think they are going to be a team that's going to be competing for first place in the league once again. So I like the Rangers to win the division as well. I do think Carolina's taking a step back this year. And I do think that the Devils are going to take a big step forward. So really, I think it is between the Rangers and the Devils, but I don't know if the Devils are there yet. A lot of expectations for them. But I think this Rangers team, being mostly the same team as last year, except slightly improving, I think they are a good pick to win the division. I don't have a Stanley Cup ticket on the Rangers as of now, but that will be something I will be looking at in the regular season. The Rangers had 114 points last year. And now their point total is at 100.5.
I think that's free, by the way, just to put that out there. I think that's ridiculous.
Well, I don't know if I would say free, but yeah, I don't know why it's a 14-point reduction based on the fact that I do think the team slightly improved last year. I get it; the Devils are going to be much better, but
the division's weaker.
Yeah, you've got Columbus, which in for a bad season. You've got Pittsburgh, which is getting older. People seem to like the Islanders, but adding Duclair is not going to all of a sudden change the team. He is a guy that does have an injury past. So Carolina taking a step back. Washington, question marks.
I think they'll be better, but yeah, they're still not like they're not a contender, right?
Yeah, so basically for me, 100.5 points over minus 115. I'm not betting a minus 350 for them to make the playoffs, but if you are able to parlay that with something, I would do that because I just don't see how this team could miss the playoffs.
Rangers and Devils together. I don't know what those odds would be, but
there you go. And yeah, basically on this list, I'd be looking to place a ticket for them to win the Stanley Cup during the season. But my favorite bet on this list is over 100.5 points, minus 115. Jackson, team future bets for the Rangers. What do you think about this list?
Yeah, so I will say, like, I don't bet the Rangers ever, but the one thing I will do is I'll take them to win the cup at the beginning of the season and at the deadline. So I will have myself a Stanley Cup ticket for the Rangers. I do think that it's a real possibility again this year. I think that winning the division plus 250, like there's not a ton of value there necessarily. Like that's a long time to have money tied up on only a plus 250 line. And I think winning the conference might be a better bet. Plus 650 for them to get to the Cup final again. After what we've seen with Florida and Edmonton in recent years, when those teams that get really close then finally get over the hump, maybe that continues. I'm in agreement. Minus 350 for yes is not really playable on its own at all. But I don't see any reason they're not going to make the playoffs. I already called it out, but I think over 100.5 points is a great bet. I would be very, very, very surprised if the Rangers don't have 101 or more points this year. And I think it would really only be a matter of injuries at best, or at worst, sorry. So least points in the NHL. Terry, I don't know why you're including that on there, man. That's messed up.
Every team, that's what I said at the beginning of this. Every team has the same number of, or the same kind of bets for this segment.
That's super fair, man. Super fair. I hope there's no one out there that thinks that's happening. You might have to get yourself checked out somewhere if you do. But yeah, that's my take on this list. I think that the real value is on the Cup and the conference and the point total for the season.
All right, we're in agreement. 110 plus points is interesting.
It is.
Because,
It
as I
is.
said, they had 114 last year.
It might be a
I
better
do
angle
think
than that for than the division at the same odds.
Yeah, yeah. So plus 250, I think that's appealing as well. Maybe if you were going with the 100.5 points, maybe you cut your bet in half and go half on the 100.5 and half on the 110 plus. That could be a good thing to look at. And now we've got player future bets. And I was saying to Jackson before the show started, a lot of different bets with the Rangers for player future bets. And there's actually one on this list that I mentioned before I even started doing the season preview shows. When I was
I know
just
what you're
at the
going to
very
say.
beginning process, I saw one name on this list and I thought, what? And yes, it's Matt Rempe there at 2.5 goals, 7.5 points. But I'll get to him here in a second. Artemi Panarin. Last year he had 49 goals. The season before that he had 29. So a 20 goal increase last year, despite playing in 82 games both seasons. So a big goal increase for Panarin. 35.5 is a little bit high for me. 120 points he got last year at 92. The season before that, 96. Before that, 99.5 points. I think he hits that. I do, as long as he stays healthy. But it is a high total for me, so no play there. Alexis Lafreniere at 29.5 goals. He had 28 last year, 16 the season before that, 57 points last year, and 39 the season before that. So if you look at his odds here for goals and points, the books do expect a Lafreniere to continue to improve and continue to move forward in his development. So because he hasn't hit those numbers yet, it does make me put the pause on betting those. Zibanejad, 26 goals last year, 39 the season before that, 29 the season before that, 81 games played last year, 82 in 22-23, 81 in 21-22. So Mika Zibanejad is one of those players that, for the most part, has stayed healthy a lot in his career. A lot of these seasons he's played in over 80 games. Of course, the shortened year, 56 game season, he played in 56 games. So Zibanejad is one of those players that stays healthy for the most part. So that could be someone you want to look at. As I said, 26 goals last year, 39 the season before that. So his goal total took a little bit of a step back. 72 points last year, 91 the season before that, 81 the season before that. I would be looking at Zibanejad point total over. I think he can get into the 80s on that top line, top power play for the Rangers. Matt Rempe, 1 goal last season in 17 games played. And then 1 goal in the playoffs in 11 games played. So he hasn't hit 3 goals in a season yet, but he's only played in 1 year, 17 games. If Rempe is in the lineup all season long, which is the question, but if he is, then I would be taking over 2.5 goals. I just think that's too low for a player if he does play all season long. 2 points in 17 games played. His point total is at 7.5. Again, that seems kind of low. I think I would go with the goals though. Um, if I was going to bet Rempe. Adam Fox, 72.5 points. He had 73 last year, 72 the season before that, 74 the season before that. Last year, he played in 72 games played, but he still got to 73 points. So Fox over point total, I would be looking at that. I do think as long as he stays healthy, he's going to have a good year. Trocheck, 68.5 points. He had 77 last year, 42 the season before that, 30 the season before that in Carolina. The last 3 years, 81, 82, 82 games played, which is exactly what you want to see when betting future bet for a player. And finally, Chris Kreider, 35.5 goals. 39 last year, 36 the season before that, 52 the season before that. Most likely, I will be on Chris Kreider. And I know it's 35.5, which is a little bit high. But Chris Kreider's not really an assist guy. He is a sniper, put the puck in the back of the net type guy. So 35.5 is a little bit high, but based on his injury history the last few years and the fact that he's hit it in all 3 years, uh, I like it over 35.5 goals. Jackson, big list here for player future bets. Who do you think is going to have a good season this year? And who would you be looking at for future bets for the player points?
Yeah, so I'm not a huge player points future bet just because of injuries. I don't like to have that as a possibility. But frankly, the only one that I would really like to bet is probably Lafreniere points from this list. Like that's the one that sticks out to me the most. I could see him being closer to a point per game player this year, and he's been able to stay in the lineup for the majority of his career as well. So I really like that line. I like the 64.5. And there's one that you and I talked about that's not on the list, but Trocheck over, I think it's 22 or 23.5 goals. I don't necessarily think he has 40 something assists this year. 24 goals though, like he's a great shooter, always has been. Likes to be in that bumper trigger man spot on the power play. That's where the Rangers like to put him. And he still plays a lot of top line minutes at second and third, potentially third line this year. I think Hedl might make a bump up at some point if the Rangers are struggling at all. That's a change I could see that could get made. But that's another one that stuck out to me. Kreider goals, that's always a great bet. I'm totally in agreement with you there. Like that's a great one to have. Frankly, for me though, like with goals, even with player props kind of across the board, like I'd rather take Kreider to score against the Devils or something at plus 110 on one night and make my one unit there and be good to go. But I do agree that's another strong bet.
Awesome. Yeah, Trocheck, his goal prop is at 22.5
I love that. I really do.
for this year. And last year he had 25, 22 the season before that, 21 the season before that. So
It's always
he
where he's
has,
around.
yeah, he's been right around that total. And finally, before we finish off the show, again, I couldn't fit all the player bets on one page, so I had to split it up to two here. Now we've got the goalie wins here. Shesterkin, 34.5 wins. He had 36 last year, 37 the season before that, 36 the season. So really, he's been extremely consistent
Yeah, I like
with
that.
his win total. Goals against average again has been pretty consistent, and he's just been a consistent goalie, playing in 55 games, 58 games, 53 games the last 3 seasons. So
Great workload.
win total over 34.5. I would take that. I think that's a good play. Shesterkin to win the Vezina. I think is a good play as well. Fox to win the Norris at plus 800. There's a lot of guys I think going to be competing for the Norris this year. I think Fox will be one of them. Not going to pull the trigger there, though. Laviolette, Jack Adams plus 850. I put that on here, but I'm a bit surprised at the odds for this at plus 850. With the fact that the Rangers won the President's Trophy last year, what exactly can Laviolette do to win the Jack Adams? Because most of the time it is given to the surprise team. So,
Yeah,
like if Phil, I don't want to use Philadelphia because they don't like Tortorella, but if
Utah.
a team like Seattle goes and wins the Pacific, I think there's a shoe in for Jack Adams. So I put it on this list because it's plus 850, but I don't think it's a good bet because I don't see how Laviolette can get there plus 850. But I do like Shishkin wins and Shishkin to win the Vezina. I think he has a good year. Connor Hellebuck, I do think, has just been really a regular season goalie. And I do think Winnipeg is kind of in that there's question marks about them defensively as well in a very tough division. So I could see them taking the step back. I don't see the Rangers taking a step back. So Shishkin wins and Vezina for me. Jackson, what do you think here? Player future bet / awards for the Rangers.
Yeah, I would say that the one that that jumps out to me is Shesterkin to win the Vezina. I'm not convinced you get a better price during the season. I can see him coming out of the gates really hot. He's the kind of guy that last season is not going to sit well with him. If you've heard him in interviews, uh, he kind of almost thrives off of those sorts of experiences and used it to drive him to continue to be competitive. So I love him to win the Vezina this year. He's the guy that I think brings it home, regardless of me being a Ranger fan or not. Like you said with the Norris, there's a lot of young, talented defensemen that I think are very much in the conversation to win this. One of my picks is actually Miro Heiskanen. I think he's sitting even higher than Fox is on that list. So there's a lot of names that I think could win the Norris. I'm not convinced that pulling the trigger on Fox is a great move, especially with his injury history of late. He's missed some games, and he had a knee injury in the postseason last year. And again, I agree with you with Laviolette. He didn't win the Jack Adams last year, and I kind of thought he could have. And so I'm not convinced there's anything he can do this year that would make the Rangers' season be so different that he would win the Jack Adams, even if they win the President's Trophy again. I think it's more than likely going to go to a first-year coach with a surprise team, or someone that gets hired halfway into the season, like a Chris Knobloch sort of situation from this past year, right? So that's kind of my opinion on it. I would pull the trigger on Shesterkin. I don't think I'd pull the trigger on the others, so I'm agreeing with you there, Terry.
Right. Yeah, I think maybe if the Rangers had a record-breaking season in the regular season, they
games,
broke the record for wins and points, then maybe he could get
yes,
there, but that's asking a lot.
I'd rather take the Rangers to have 120 points of whatever those odds are, because it's probably crazier, right?
Yeah. But that's it. That is the New York Rangers season preview show. Thank you, Jackson, for coming on. Everyone go and give him a follow. His Twitter link is in the description below. So make sure to go and give him a follow. And we'll hopefully see you on future shows during the season.
Definitely.
And best of luck to your Rangers. I hope they have another good year.
Same for your Wild,
a bunch
Terry.
of money
It'll be a good season, I think, for your boys. I'm high on them this year.
Awesome. And we'll talk to you guys later, and we'll see you guys on the next season preview show. Thanks for watching, guys.